Hello everyone and welcome back to Jessie Kate Creates. Today we're going to be making a fall themed card featuring some ink swiping. The colors I'm going to be using today are Waffle, Flowers, Safe Choice, and Peace of Mind, and Stampin' Up's Hello Honey and Tangerine Tango. So to start with, I just have a A2 sized panel of 80-pound cardstock that I'll cut down a little bit smaller later. But I'm just taking the ink pad and swiping it right across the paper and trying to make sure I get all the little white spots. I saw Carissa Wiley and Christina Warner doing some really cool stuff with ink swiping over the past few weeks, so I figured I'd, attempt a take at ink swiping. So when I'm putting the ink down, you'll notice I'm kind of tilting my pad so that it doesn't completely cover the paper, so I just get the edge of it. And I'm just swiping it across the paper. I'm trying to get a little bit of overlap between the ink colors. And I don't want this to be perfect. I like how it looks when it's a little bit messy, so I'm not too worried about if the lines are straight or how much it overlaps or anything like that. And I'm just swiping everything with all of the colors. I picked these colors because I wanted kind of a fall theme, but I wanted to mix it up a little bit. Also, my ink selection is rather limited, but I thought these colors all worked really well together and still gave me a bit of a muted fall color palette. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do these colors make you think of fall? I know right now it looks pretty intense, but once the ink dries, it will lighten up a bit. And what you'll see in a second, I got some of that ink a little higher than I wanted, but I just went in with the ink pad and covered it up so it didn't look quite like a mistake. Now that the ink is drying, the pink to me looked a little too light, so I did go back in with the pink ink pad and just put a little bit more ink on it just so that it would darken up a little bit. Now, since I had all the inks out, I decided instead of making one card, I'd go ahead and make 3. I'm not showing me making all 3 cards, but at each step I just do it to all 3 of the panels. So these cards are actually really easy to mass produce. So now I'm going to go ahead and set that aside to dry and work on the next element of the card, which is going to be some die cutting for the front of the card. So here I have the Neat and Tangled Heart of Gold die, and a little later we'll use the stamps as well. And I just went through my scrap paper and found some scraps that were big enough for me to be able to die cut this heart, and I'll just take it to my machine and die cut it. Now I did die cut 3 of these, and that's because I wanted to stack them up so that they would be a substantial element on the front of the card. So at this point, I'm just taking some glue, and I just use the Art Glitter Glue. I love the fine tip you can get for the bottle for things like this where you have to get into tiny spaces. I'm not completely covering the die, just going to some of those big points, and I'm going to go ahead and stack them together just like so. And I also like this glue because it does have a little bit of wiggle room, so I had place to get it kind of just right how I liked it. And then once those are together, I'll go ahead and add more glue and add on the third and final layer. And I really like doing things like this for simpler cards where there's not as much going on. I think having a weightier element really does make a difference on the card. Now I use white cardstock for this, but you really could use anything because we're going to cover it with embossing powder. So once those were done, stuck them aside to dry. Now that it's dry, I've added a little scrap handle to this so it will be easier to emboss. So now I am just completely covering that die cut with Versmark sticky ink, and then I'll come in with the Recollections gold embossing powder. I just get this at Michael's, but I really like how well it works. And I'm just going to completely sprinkle that over top of my die cut. Now, at first I was only planning to do 1 layer of this, but when it was done, it looked fine, and you could definitely just do 1 layer. but I really wanted it to have the look of like a metallic or a metal element, so I am going to end up doing a second layer. But you'll see here, this is just me working to melt the powder. I did let my heat gun heat up for a minute or two before I started to use it, and you can see that's what the first layer looks like, and it doesn't look bad at all, but I just wanted it to be a little bit more, I don't know, metallic-y, so I am going to go ahead and add in a second layer to this. And it's pretty easy to do, just tapping off the excess powder. And I'm going to heat emboss, or I'm going to take my heat tool to warm up this layer as well. With intricate dies like this, you just want to make sure, be really careful that you melt all of that powder. Sometimes the powder likes to hide in corners. But once it's done, here is what it looks like. I love the way that looks. So we're going to come back to our panel that's had time to dry. And I'm going to use a stitched rectangle die from Scrappiness to just cut that out of the paper so that it is smaller than an A2 panel would be. Now, you want to save the scrap from this piece. Don't throw this out. We're going to use it to decorate the inside of the card a little later. So now I am taking the Heart of Gold stamp set from Neat and Tangled, and I'm just going to use that sentiment, "You have a heart of gold." And I have not glued on the heart yet. I'm just using it to help me figure out the spacing and where exactly I want my stamp to be. And like I said before, because I am making multiple cards, I am using a stamp positioner to make sure or to make it easier to make these cards. My little anti-static powder tool is out, so I've honestly just been using some baby powder that's like just 100% cornstarch, and it works just fine. So that's what you saw there before. So I'm inking up the stamp and pressing that down. I am doing it twice because this is a pretty fine sentiment, and I want to make sure I get it just completely covered. So just pressing that down, and then I will cover that with the same gold embossing powder and go ahead and melt that with my heat tool. And when it's all done, I don't think I had let my heat tool warm up as much, so it took a while here, but when it's all done, I love the way the gold looks with these fall colors. I don't know, I really like this palette. So now with that done, you can see there it's nice and shiny. And so now the next step is to add the heart to the front of the card. So I'm just going to add glue to the back of it and then press it down. Again, I really like this glue because it dries matte. It's not shiny, so even if some does kind of seep out the sides, you won't notice it on the final card. So just trying to line that up how I think it looks good. And I'll press it down. And then I'll set it aside and just set something heavy, which you can kind of see in the corner on top of it while it dries. For the inside of the card, I have a white panel that is 4 by 5 1/4. And as you can see, I just cut off the little side strips from the panel we had inked up earlier. And I'm going to use those just to add a little, I don't know, a little matching element to the inside of my card. I like to do this whether I'm using, pattern paper or whatever it is. I like to do something small on the inside of the card just so that it matches. And so instead of throwing these little scraps out, I decided they were the perfect size to use on the inside of the card. So I'm just going to glue those down and then use my scissors to cut off, to flip this over and cut off the excess paper. And it's super easy, but it really does just add a little something extra to your card. If you can hold on to your card, unlike I did there. Okay, so nice and simple inside of the card, ready to go. So now it's just really assembling everything and putting it all together. Because this is the only thing on the front of the card, I am going to mount it with some foam tape just to give it a little bit of extra interest and dimension. I have a roll of 1-inch foam tape that I love for stuff like this. It makes it so quick and easy. So see, even though this card is kind of clean and simple, adding the dimension just makes a really big difference. So I've just taken off the, actually first, I'm going to tape my card shut. That is something I learned from Kathy Zilski. I think she does that in a lot of her videos. And it does make it a lot easier to put the elements on the front of a card. So I've just taped it shut. And now I'm going to add my panel on top. Bam, once I like it, I'll go ahead and press it down. And yeah, that's the front of the card. I'm really liking how clean that looks. So next for the inside of the card, I'm just going to take the panel we made earlier, add some tape to the back, and add it to the card. And so this card was pretty quick and easy to make. Also, all of the elements were simple enough that this card is really good if you need to mass produce some cards. Making these 3 cards went by pretty quickly. It was pretty easy to do. So just making sure I like how it's centered on the card, pressing that down, and there we go. That is our finished card. Like I said, I went ahead and made 3. They were super simple to put together using that mass producing technique. So there you go. Those are the cards. If you want to see more photos of these, you can always head over to my Instagram post. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Bye.